Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. This week we talked to Andrew Heaton and we asked the question, is political correctness going to kill comedy? We also discussed for the very first time his early stag films from the 1970s. Check it out. Spontaneously, something is supposed to happen, and it's supposed to be entertaining.
Okay. All right. I dig it. I like the pomp.
Andrew Heaton.
Matt Kibbe.
So I'm a bit of a fanboy. I've been watching your stuff for years.
Thank you.
And
this is going really well so far.
You are one of my favorite libertarian comedians.
Thank you. Well, there's only three of us, so I feel like yeah. that's not a huge compliment, but I appreciate it.
Yeah. So there's two others that I love as well. So. Mm-hmm. But there's only three, so yeah. you get that. But
the nice thing too is that do you know Lou Perez?
Yeah.
Like I had somebody ask me one time, are you guys competitors? And I'm like, no. There's three of us. We're fine. Like he can take the entire East Coast, and I can take the West Coast.
Have you divided the world?
Yeah, we just divided up. Like I get Scandinavia, he gets like whatever colony there is in Argentina. It's great. We've got like an Illuminati thing going on in the background.
Yeah. But you, so I want to get a little bit into your personal history, but the question we have that I want you to solve is whether or not comedy can save the world, or conversely, has social justice warriors and political correctness, have they killed comedy, which means, of course, we're all doomed.
Right. Yes, it can save the world. And I do not think political correctness is helping it tremendously.
Yeah.
I think... we're living in a really weird time from a comedy perspective, in that when I was a kid, I grew up in Oklahoma in the 80s, which is basically like the 50s for anyone else. So I'm functionally from...
Was it actually in black and white?
It was in black. Yeah, we didn't get Technicolor until Governor Boren. So first 6 years of my life, all black and white. When I was growing up, The Simpsons was like very risque. Like it was on the edge, and the people throwing hissy fits about it were the moral majority. And they were, like he said, butthead, and like there's a gay couple or whatever the thing was at the time. And the progressives at the time were the ones going, it's a cartoon. Calm down. It's not an exegesis. It's a cartoon. Calm down. And that has completely flipped to now where it's like, well, Apu is portraying an immigrant in a less than ideal job. Therefore, all this, and it's the conservatives now that are going, it's a cartoon. Yeah, why are you worked up about this? I think in general, the more sacred cows you have, the harder you're going to have a time of being funny. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of the reason you don't see a lot of social conservative comedians. There is like a kind of interesting bandwidth for Christian comedians that can do churches. Yeah. And I know a couple, and they're very funny. But generally speaking, though, if you get up and you're like, I can't say anything about Jefferson because that guy's a founding father, they'll get mad at me. And I'm seeing that proliferate on a lot of progressive comedians, and I don't think it's going to aid them too much. Plus, we're going for applause a lot of the time, which I also don't think is the goal. You're supposed to be going for. But can I say where I think it can help?
Yes.
Because I've really been ranting for like 5 minutes now. I appreciate you letting me just talk.
I'm just running out the clock until it becomes noon so we can drink whiskey.
Yeah, excellent. Good. That's all I'm doing as well. I'm just just blathering until I get to have a drink. There's a really good comedian named Chris Bliss, who I'm a big fan of. He does some political stuff. I think he's very much in favor of the Bill of Rights. He's I'd say he's almost certainly very progressive, very democratic, but a big fan of individual rights. And he's got a good TED Talk where he talks about how comedy is a very good way of putting forth an idea that would otherwise be unreceptive to somebody. And that's very much been my experience. I mean, I started out doing stand-up here in Washington, D.C., and I've done a lot of political stand-up here. And one of the jokes that I do when I'm in D.C. is I'll say, I really like how open-minded liberals are about things they already agree with. And it gets a great laugh from the liberals in the audience. Like they appreciate it in a way that I don't think would come across well if I was just like, I don't think you guys are that, like if I was arguing, it wouldn't work. But I find that when you're doing comedy, if it's funny, people will almost always go, okay, I'm going to put on this hat for 35 seconds to the end of your punchline. I'll try out this idea with you. And then they're done and they'll take it off. But there is this brief period of time where you can communicate ideas. And I think that's very, very useful.
Yeah. So it's afternoon.
Oh, good.
And
thank God I'm done.
I mean
that
was super interesting, but I feel like we should have a drink.
I agree.
And you're a Scotchman, right?
I am very much a Scotchman. Yes,
I figured because
it is my blood type at this point in my life.
Although in that jacket you could wear bourbon, I suppose.
I do. I look like a bourbon drinker. I look like I should just be like, Matt, that's a good point. Let me just pull out my banjo and like strum a few tunes about comedy for you.
If you're listening to this, you're probably blessed because Andrew has picked out an interesting combination.
I'm wearing a white window pane blazer with a like kind of a cotton candy tie, so I look like a bluegrass performer on Easter in the South. Is about how I look at the moment.
Which is kind of a niche fashion statement. Is that fair to say?
I feel like I am a fashion leader. I'm bringing waistcoats back. I'm bringing all this stuff back. There's all sorts of great things to hop on the Heaton train to see what happens next.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Do you have a lot of fanboys that are showing up at your concerts wearing waistcoats now?
Not yet, but I look forward to that. I haven't done as much live performance as I used to do, partly because I'm in Dallas and I just don't have the opportunity to do it anymore. I was going to come up here to D.C., and I wanted to do an audience show, which I think would be a lot of fun. And I'm curious to see we didn't have the infrastructure to do it in the amount of time that I had this time around, so we weren't able to pull it off. But I'm very curious to see what that's like when Heatonites, I'm not sure what my group would be called when they start coming out of the woodwork.
Heathenites.
I'm thinking I'm guessing waistcoats and like a lot of horse humor is my suspicion as to what that would look like, is like a lot of like shirts with horses on them. I think that's what's going to happen.
Well, I want to see that when it happens, but let's I just did a deep dive on you and I found some.
That's good stuff. Thank you for that. Dalmore,
Yes.
Nice.
Cheers. I did a deep dive on Andrew Heaton, which I don't recommend to the audience because there is some weird shit.
Yeah, well, we were talking about the stag films I did back in the 70s. I mean, those were very odd. It was a weird time in my life.
I mean, we all had to pay the rent, right? I don't judge.
Well, that's how I got most of my friends. It was a good time.
But give people a little bit of your background, because you're an actual comedian as opposed to a libertarian that's trying to be funny.
Honestly, thank you very much, because that is how I view it. I view myself as a comedian who happens to be libertarian rather than the other way around. And I don't. And if I think anybody that's looking to be political and they're like, and maybe I can weaponize it with humor, you're just sit out. Don't even bother trying to do it. If you're trying to if you want to use comedy as an agitprop, it's not going to be funny. Don't even bother. I've been both political and comedic for a very long time. I wrote kind of knockoff Dave Barry columns when I was in college, and I was doing a lot of comedy writing and humor writing then. And I came up here to D.C. in 2009, maybe 2010. I don't remember exactly, but I worked for the House of Representatives, and I was doing stand-up at night. And so I was being political simultaneously while learning how to be funny.
Do you ever admit who you worked for?
Sure. No, I'm happy to. Like, we can kind of get into that because, I think our worlds probably collided about the time I left. I worked for Blue Dogs, who I still like. I would love for the Blue Dog Caucus to like resurge and like carve out a space in the Democratic Party.
The Blue Dogs are extinct in the Democratic Party.
As I sometimes say, I think like the remaining Blue Dogs, like one is in hiding on Tatooine, the other one's on Dagobah. I have been like run out of town. And if you're unfamiliar with this at home, Blue Dogs were, at the time, they would have called themselves conservative Democrats. I think that branding has been modified enough in the Trump years that they're now moderate
They
Democrats.
were wild-eyed and obsessed about crazy things like balancing the budget.
Yes, thank you.
That species is extinct in both parties now. So.
Well, they did have a little bit of an uptick in the midterm elections. The two things. The group that got hammered that bothered me, I like the Problem Solvers Caucus, which tends to be like kind of anti-label, pragmatic Republicans, moderate Republicans, and they got hammered. But the Blue Dogs picked up some seats, so I remain ever hopeful that wing will become ascendant again. But I like them. I worked for two Blue Dogs. I started out for Dan Boren, who is a congressman from Oklahoma, and then I wound up working for Tim Holden from Pennsylvania. And then I went off and got a master's degree in Edinburgh in international politics. And I thought that I was going to come back and be a bureaucrat. And I did come back for a little bit. And then I thought about it, and I'd been doing stand-up in Edinburgh as well. And I went, I would rather be funny. I'm just going to go be funny. So I was here for about a year, and I finally went, there's no real purpose for me being here. So I went up to New York, wound up becoming a TV writer, doing stand-up up there, and then it keeps weaving back together. I actually just left New York this summer and moved down to Austin, which is basically Brooklyn with cowboy hats, and had not anticipated being political, and then got a call from the Blaze, and they offered to give me my own show, and I went, okay, I think that could be interesting.
Yeah, and we are sort of the token libertarians at Blaze TV, although Glenn Beck certainly dabbles in his own sort of emerging libertarianism, and I encourage that, and maybe you do as well.
Yeah, although I will say that it's been really interesting the last few years. I find that I am less interested in policy now than I used to be. I'm more interested in heuristics and how people think.
Yeah.
I find that while there's overlap between libertarians and progressives on a lot of social issues, and there's overlap with conservatives and libertarians on a lot of economic issues, there is a different mindset. And I find that there are a lot of conservatives that I know that I would describe as tolerant conservatives, but they're still very conservative in their mindset. And it's a worldview that is kind of constantly coming back to this idea of civilization versus other or barbarism or entropy. But civilization is under attack is kind of, I think, the internal conservative mantra. Whereas I think the libertarian thing is it voluntary or is it forced? Because that's what I'm generally on the lookout for. It's like one of my friends described IGA, the International Grocers Association, as a socialist institution, and I nearly hit him. I was like, no, it's not. It's a voluntary cooperative of like they can do whatever they want. I'll go buy vegetables from them. That's not socialist because there aren't guns involved forcing you to buy their tomatoes.
Well, I think that this you talk about the mindset and the way that people process information, and language has to be part of that. But I feel like comedians first, but even libertarians, we're either Switzerland or we're on a different planet altogether when we're watching this increasingly hostile tribal warfare between the right and the left. Let's accept that
what a
right
great,
versus
glorious
left thing.
Manichaean battle. So happy to be involved in that. Yeah.
It's like the Game of Thrones, and at some point there'll be a dragon, and I don't know what happens then. But
I actually just did an episode this week on Game of Thrones, and I was talking to my friend who actually I don't know if he was a blue dog, but he was a Democrat that I knew back when I was in the House, and I was describing I really like Varys in Game of Thrones because I feel like every day I'm walking into the sort of the overall ether of political media, and people like, so do you hate Starks or do you hate Lannisters? And I'm like, well, I rather like Lord Hickenlooper. He's a good dude, and I like Hickenlooper, and I like Meister Flake. He's all right, but they're wanting me to engage in this just killing each other with pitchforks hatred that I have no part in, and I don't really like either team. And I'm not on either team. So it is a weird thing for those of us that aren't really on the left-right spectrum, and I don't think of it in terms of binary options.
Yeah.
For those of us that aren't a part of that, it's a really weird thing. Do you find I find that everyone thinks I am a pleasant visitor from the other team when I talk to them. So my conservative friends believe I'm a kind of moderate progressive. My progressive friends think that I'm a moderate conservative, and I'm like, no, I'll maybe the moderate bit, but I'm not conservative or progressive. I'm not really on that thing, but they're so happy to fight each other that they're wanting to suck people into the battle.
Yeah. I don't get the pleasant part, but I get the rest. He's definitely not one of us.
Yeah.
And we'll let him join for now, but we may have to kill him off later. I think
I just might always be Alan Colmes everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Everywhere I'm always the visiting team. Yeah.
But I think I think comedians have always been sort of the tip of the spear in terms of using language in ways that you have to connect with your audience. You don't get to preach to the choir because if people don't understand what you're saying, they're not going to laugh, and that's something I think both sides are missing. Is there's a vernacular problem. That we're using words that they don't understand, and vice versa, and that's part of what tribalism is all about. You're preaching to your tribe, almost not wanting the other team to even understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, one of the big revelations I had the last few months, just describing all the stuff I was just complaining about. I mentioned that to one of my friends, and I was describing some situation in which it seemed to me that I was in agreement with whatever other clique of friends that I had, and they were mad at me, and I didn't understand this. And my friend, well, it's because they don't care what you say. They just care how you say it. Like your beliefs are immaterial. It's your vocabulary.
Yeah.
And I went, that explains so much because I'm not using the right I speak Republican, I've been told. Like I sound more like a Republican in terms of the terms I use, even though I don't think like one or even vote like one. But we're living in that vernacular is important. I think that there's a significant tribal element to that as well, where we do have this intense tribal dynamic at work, and you want to be a part of a team, and a lot of that group identity comes from having a team to hate. There has to be a group you hate, and then you want to just constantly show your fidelity to the team by hating the other team and doing it loudly and constantly. That's definitely there. I'll say comedy is better about that in that. Particularly in stand-up, there are a lot of stand-up comedians that just enjoy ruffling an audience. They enjoy, like Bill Burr, who I think he's probably a progressive Democrat. I don't know, but he also
he says he is.
He is, yeah.
Yeah.
He's. I'll say he is. He's fairly skeptical of a lot of the more Byzantine progressive theology coming out these days.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, though, if you watch him, he will try very hard to alienate his audience at the beginning of a set, and then he'll reel them back in, and he gets a kick out of that, and I enjoy watching that. I also find that comedians in general tend to be very pro-freedom of speech. And in my experience, really getting into the world of comedy, there's improv, there's stand-up, there's maybe comedy writing or sketch and things like that. Improv comedians tend to be far more group-oriented and are far more concerned about the effects on the audience than the intent. Whereas stand-up comedians tend to be much more focused on intent and tend to defend other stand-up comedians. So if I get up and I say something that either is inadvertently inappropriate or might even be inappropriate, a lot of the time the stand-up response is like, he's on stage, he's got the mic, shut up. Like, this is fine. We're allowed to do that here.
And that to me is like, I was talking to Dave Rubin on a recent show about one of the downsides of the democratization of the internet is that we don't have that common space where we can all just hang out and do something together without it devolving into politics. And comedy for applause is this new thing where everybody has to sort of put their political philosophy on their sleeves. And it's always progressive today. It's very difficult to find anything else. But there was a day when someone like George Carlin or Monty Python, things that were like, we all could laugh at that because they were actually making fun of all of us. Mm-hmm. They didn't just pick on one side or the other. And I feel like when I ask if comedy can save the world, that's what I'm thinking about because comedians are the ones that break down those predispositions, those biases, even the bigotry that someone might have for somebody or something that's just different. And by sort of ripping the bark off of it and making fun of everyone, it actually brings us together in a weird way.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. No, I think you're right about that. And I think you see that with a lot of comedians. Like I did, Todd Barry?
No.
Todd Barry's a very, very funny comedian. I've done some stuff with him on Earwolf before when I've been on Fake the Nation. But I've listened to some of his albums where and Todd's very progressive, very, very progressive, but he'll go do stand-up in Mobile, Alabama, and he'll mention this, and then people in New York will be like, well, good luck, I'm in Mobile, Alabama, and he'll immediately slam them for being, presumptive, bigoted, all these different things, call them fake liberals.
Right.
What he would call them. But nonetheless, though, he doesn't have, from what I can tell, he has no traction for people that are just looking to shit on a group they don't like. He's not, and I think there's a lot of that there. I think in general, comedians like killing sacred cows.
Yeah.
And comedy tends to be anti-authoritarian by nature. And we're in a weird spot right now where the head of our civil institution, Trump, you can be anti-authoritarian by opposing Trump, but at the same time, I'd say culturally, we become very, very authoritarian from the left. And at the moment, I don't think those two things have been sussed out. I think that will happen, though, where we'll reach a peak period where people won't become conservatives or they won't necessarily become libertarians, but I think they'll kind of get burnt out on some of the more extremes of sort of political correctness. You can only say X if you're from Y group and that kind of thing. I think that's not going to stick around for a long time. It's interesting that you brought up George Carlin. because I do think that Carlin is emblematic of a kind of flip that's happened in the comedy world where, he was doing comedy forever, right? But like, let's say in the 70s, 60s and 70s, I think, having been born in the 80s myself, I think that America was much more of a safe space outside of comedy in regards to politics. And so you went to a comedy club to be challenged. You'd go see George Carlin to get ruffled.
Yeah.
And now, everyone won't shut the hell up outside of comedy. And so you're seeing like kind of Jim Gaffigans come in, and it's like, you can just come laugh about donuts for an hour. And so I think you're going to see that. I also think you're going to see a resurgence of Monty Python humor. We haven't had any Zucker Brothers movies in a few years. I think they're going to come back. When Steve Martin really came into his own, it was at the tail end of Watergate, and everybody was very cynical and very snarky, and he had nothing to do with that, and was just very fun and very absurdist. And I think that we're reaching peak snark very rapidly. I don't know quite what the dates will be, but I think that at the conclusion of the Trump administration, be it in a year and a half or 5 years, you'll see that kind of finally taper off, and you'll see absurdity start rising again.
Yeah.
Much like the Blue Dog Caucus. And
Yes.
that will be when I shine, Matt.
I would love to see peak snark end, because
that'd be great.
It's tiresome.
Yes.
It really is. I was reading this I think it was 2014. Chris Rock did this interview with New York Magazine, where this is where he famously said, "I don't do college campuses anymore because they're too conservative." And of course, he didn't mean politically conservative. He doesn't use the word, but he's talking about this sort of new left-wing fundamentalism.
Yeah,
where,
that stamp out the blasphemy. Yeah.
There's this whole hierarchy of both privilege and the burden of victimhood that determines who you can make fun of. And by the time you get through the list, the only people you can make fun of are white guys like me.
Yes. Yeah. You and I are at the bottom of the hierarchy of victimhood.
I'm fair game,
Yeah.
but everyone else is ranked somewhere in this protected victimhood
Well,
class.
and I'll add to that. It's also one of the things that I occasionally I get irritated with my comedian friends on, of all political strides. There's a lot of talk about punching up versus punching down.
Yeah.
You need to punch up, which is, if you're unfamiliar with the term, you need to go after the big people. Don't go after the little people. And I'm like, I don't really view comedy as punching. Like, I don't really like fighting, and I don't like. I'll make fun of people, in my comedy, but I also like the majority of it's not really pointed at any particular group, and even then when I'm doing it, I try to make fun of ideas more than I try and make fun of people. I don't really like using it as an assault. I view it as I like comedy in that it can make people think differently and entertain them, and those things are very pleasant. But I don't really like using it so much as a weapon. And then yes, when you add in all of these other things, I'm in no position myself to be able to really comment, given that I have inherited privilege, much like original sin, and I reek of it, and therefore I should just sort of apologize and retreat into the shadows.
That might be a whole stand-up bit, to be honest with you.
Well, what I've been doing on my show, we've only done it a couple of times, but I have a character that I do called Father Michael O'Grimsley from the Church of Woke. And I feel like that's a huge target because I think that generally anytime someone is full of moral certitude, and there's plenty of that amongst conservative circles, but there's a lot of moral certitude with specifically the woke people and progressivism, then that becomes a target. I look at it like my undergraduate was in history and religious studies, so I look at wokeness and I'm like, that is straight up a religion. That is that is a theological bent.
Yeah.
And so I look at that and I'm like, well, I can start making fun of that for the exact same reason that justifiably we were making fun of the moral majority in the 80s and 90s. All these people that were getting worked up about Saturday Night Live or whatever.
Is born again, right?
Yeah.
You're finally
you've been awoken. You've been awakened. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's So let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk about so you're not doing as much stand up now, but you're doing this daily podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Something's Off with Andrew
Something's
Heaton.
Off with Andrew Heaton. Yeah.
And even the name itself, self-depreciating humor is my favorite, where the first victim of any shot that you take is yourself. But what's that like, producing something every day and having a conversation? Because I only have to do it once a week.
Yeah. And you get to drink whiskey. You've really figured out a good format, Matt.
Totally.
It's
in my contract.
I'll say I should have put that in mind. I'll say, overall, I enjoy doing it. It's a wonderful thing that I get paid to be clever for a living. It takes a long time to get to that point.
Yeah.
And I got to bring on a lot of neat guests. I really enjoy that. There is a little bit of burnout from the output in that I have to come up with a topic every day. We need to find a guest every day, which is further difficult at my own instigation because the main reason that I'm doing my podcast, like when I worked for Reason, I was promoting a policy or ideological agenda. It was a pro-liberty thing I was doing when I was making funny videos at Reason. Now I'm really pushing a temperamental agenda. I'm trying, like the point of the podcast is good and intelligent people can disagree on matters of substance. And in order for me to fulfill that remit, I need to bring on people I disagree with, or at least have a different viewpoint than I do on a regular basis. And that becomes that takes a lot of time and effort because it's, if we're going to do a week and I'm like, well, we don't have any progressives on this week, we need to get somebody that sees things differently than I do. Or conversely, at the beginning of the program, the problem actually was that I didn't have any Trump supporters on for a very long time. I think it was maybe like 40 episodes in or something when I finally had a Trump supporter because I was bringing in like libertarians and moderate Republicans and things. And then I'll say also doing I do a comedic sketch in every show, and I usually do Monday through Wednesday. I do at least a couple of comedic sketches, and that's a lot of comedy output.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's like 8 comedy sketches a week or so. That's a fair amount of comedy sketches. If we had a larger staff, we'd be able to tighten it a lot more. Even if I was writing it, we'd have more editorial capacity. And then like if you look at any other daily program, they've usually got like 9 writers or that kind of thing. So it's a lot of output, but it is fun. And again, I get to be paid to be clever, which is a neat and rare occurrence in the world of comedy.
And it seems to be performing. The viewership is growing and things are okay.
It is, and I'm also I am really, really heartened by the people that are coming to the podcast. Because as you noted, you and I are not conservatives and we're not Republicans, but we're on a predominantly conservative network, and I wasn't really sure if I was going to strike a chord there or not. I also, when I first started doing it, I got kind of worried if, I brought on a friend of mine that's a transgender comedian. About 2 weeks ago, we talked about a carbon tax, which I'm in favor of, and I didn't think that would be a very popular thing. But I'm finding that the people that like the program are coming largely for the temperamental element of it. They enjoy having thoughtful people talk about things and then crack jokes as opposed to people fighting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's great. If you're coming because you just want like a smart, funny guy to like not yell at people, I can produce that for a very long time.
Well, I call it the counter-revolution, and I'm trying to do the same thing, but it violates all the rules of modern internet TV or whatever we call this thing we're doing. It like almost everything is rage against the other team.
Yeah.
And it's name calling, and it's just constantly at volume 11 just being pissed off, and I watch guys like and I was inspired somewhat by Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson. I went to a Jordan Peterson concert, and it's just a civil.
Do they call it a concert?
I do, because he's playing in the same place that Springsteen played in the late 70s. I'm like, there's a freaking academic who's he's not even slightly funny. Like he's a very thoughtful guy that just sort of spouts ideas extemporaneously, and I love it. But more importantly, he's filling concert halls with this kind of thing. So my theory is that there is an audience, an untapped audience, a desperate and hungry audience for a civil conversation about ideas. I'm even letting you endorse a carbon tax on this show, which
that's right. I could see this momentary slight
we may have to
5% increase of your eyebrow. Where you would no, let him talk. Okay.
Yeah, did you see the Twitch?
Yeah.
But I got in trouble. I had one of my progressive friends on the show, and he was brave enough to come on. And it's not easy for a progressive to come on to Blaze TV and risk his or her reputation with their community. But I just wanted for people to try to understand where an honest, good, progressive guy comes from. And I happen to think that there are common values there. I'm not going to convince my friend that he's not really a progressive, and he's probably unmovable, but there is a vast audience of people who are trying to figure out where they fit, and they're looking at the tribal war saying, you know what? I don't want to be part of either. I don't want to be with the Lannisters or the Starks. I don't want to kill anybody. I don't want to fight. I just want to live my life and
I don't want to wake
get
up
along.
at 6 a.m. and immediately check Twitter to see what the president did so I can yell about it for the rest of the day and then go to the therapist about the things I yelled about. Yeah, like weirdly enough, not everybody wants to do that.
So you're taking a big risk by doing what you're doing because there's not a lot of evidence yet that you can perform on the internet by being thoughtful and reasonable.
Yeah. No, you're right about that, and that is something I think a lot about is the risk of that. Because I thought I was going to be done with political media, and there might very well come a point where I'm just like, this is not worth the bile. Like good luck to all of you. Like way to run out the guy that was willing to talk to you.
I'm deleting my Twitter account.
Yeah, like that might well happen. I'll say that I am emboldened by two things though. One, like podcasts in general. I worked in TV for a while, and in TV. I don't think we had a single segment that was longer than 8 minutes. And then you divide that by however many people you have on the segment. So on Kennedy, the show I most recently worked at, usually 2 to 3 people on camera at any given time. So you're getting 3.5 to 4 minutes to talk about some very important issue. It's not designed around, there's no reflection of Kennedy. This is a critique of the medium.
Right.
The medium doesn't lend itself to thoughtful analysis. It lends itself to shouting bumper stickers because you don't have time to do otherwise. But you look at like Joe Rogan or someone like that, he's doing gangbusters. Gangbusters, far better than a number of very impressive cable television news and legacy media. I think that's a phenomenon. The other thing, and I don't know how to tap this. I am working very hard to do it. But there are a ton of people that aren't a part of that binary. And if you're looking at it from the outside, it sure looks like America is very polarized and very extreme right now because the loud people that write, and I'll back up. I think if there's a binary in America, it's not between left and right. It's between people who type in all caps on Twitter and the rest of us. And but the people who type in all caps on Twitter, they're the ones that get the attention.
Yeah.
They're the ones that are going to be more interesting to write about and talk about. There was a Pew study that came out maybe 6 months ago that did a lot of extensive polling, and it endeavored to kind of figure out where everybody was. Now, they used a spectrum, and I don't think that a spectrum is a very helpful way of doing it because it presupposes that you are either some degree of conservative or some degree of progressive, and a lot of us aren't. That said, though, it found that about 15% of the American public was a progressive activist, and about 15% voted for Trump and was excited to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
And then there were varying degrees in between there where, you're a Democrat, but you're not really worked up about identity politics, or you're a Republican, but you're not really bothered by Mexicans. There is this, and then there's a pretty wide swath towards the center that just doesn't like loud noises, which is about where I'm at now.
Yeah,
I'm in that camp. That test would have identified me
because you're getting older.
Because I'm getting older, I don't like all those
loud
loud
noises
noises.
Scare you.
But my point though is there is this wide swath of people that I don't feel are being catered to.
Yeah.
And I think that there's I mentioned on my program, at the end of it, every program I say subscribe, rate, and review it. That way other people can find this political orphanage, because I feel like a political orphan. I don't feel like I really have a team. And I'm happy to kind of band together with just other thoughtful, kind people and to have conversations. And we don't even have to agree on stuff. But I do find that occasionally I can reach out and someone is kind of lights up and is like, oh right, yeah, I'm part of that thing. I'm part of that great unwashed mass of people that aren't a part of the culture war. And I don't know how to reach them, unfortunately, Matt, because it's hard to get people psyched about moderation. There aren't lightning rods for moderation the way there are for the political zealots out there. But I think there might be an opportunity to kind of extend that direction.
Well, I have theories about it, and we experiment with it as well. But this is where your career choice, I think, comes in real handy, because I think the way you get to that vast, I hate to call it the middle, but let's accept that spectrum thing. They're not that interested in politics. They don't process information through economic reasoning or public policy debates or any of that stuff. And I'm an economist by training, so I'm fundamentally handicapped in communicating with actual people because everything to me,
you're wanting to show people graphs.
Everything is a cost benefit for me. So but I've come to learn in my old age that that's not how normal people process the world. So things that are engaging and entertaining and values based, absolutely. I mean, there are core human values that I think libertarians nail pretty well. Don't hurt anybody and don't take their stuff. These are things that your mom taught you, and if mom said it, it's true. It's an axiom of the human condition. But when it comes to like politics and voting for this guy or that gal, that's when everyone divides and they go back into their fight corners, and they start thinking about things. So can we reach the vast middle? Yes, but it has to be human stories. It has to be entertaining. It has to be fun. It can't make you feel bad afterwards.
Yeah.
Unless you're talking about, like, I do think it's important to point out that sometimes socialism turns out pretty bad.
Yeah.
And there's no way to sort of make that fun. But those history lessons are probably important as well.
I think you're right about that. There's I do think it's this weird. I think I'm very bad at picking. I'm bad at picking the winning team. Because when I became Blue Dog Democrat,
right.
my reasoning going into it was terrible. I was like, oh, this is great because I don't really feel like I fit in with the Republicans. I don't feel like I fit in with the Democrats. But these Blue Dogs, they want to balance the budget, but they like gay people, which kind of libertarian and it's
right.
And everybody hated us because if you're a Democrat, we're just friggin' traitors that are basically Republicans, and if you're a Republican, you're a Democrat.
Right.
And then I left that and I was like, oh, libertarians. Well, everybody liked them, right? Because they like markets and gay people. So like everybody, and like, no, it's this, everybody wants to wail on them. And now I'm gravitating more towards that moderate thing, which I am discovering everyone that's a partisan hates moderates because they view them as this sort of mushy, intransigent inertia, and they just hate them. And I'm like, where do you want me to go?
Well, it's even worse with politics because people absolutely get defensive when you say the word libertarian. They immediately think Libertarian Party, big L libertarian, and they immediately think whether or not you supported Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump is said, Gary Johnson stole the votes that would have won the election for my guy. And you're like, no, that's not actually how it works. If people have a choice that they're excited about, they might show up to vote. And I think third and fourth options would be a nice thing in politics because most people feel completely alienated by these two choices decided by somebody else. And
I think I would endorse any candidate for president that made ranked choice voting their top goal. Like I would like potentially even like. I would go pretty far if they tried to disassemble that. Yeah,
I would even be happy if we sort of broke up the two-party duopoly that decides. Get this: the Democrats and Republicans control who, if anybody, gets to be on stage in a presidential debate with Democrats and Republicans. And as it turns out, they don't want anyone else on stage.
Weirdly enough. Well, and I'll add to that too. One of the things, actually, to go back to comedy, one of the things that it took me a while to figure out, and it really surprised me, was how deeply defensive people are of their tribe, but also of whatever system their tribe is in place in. If you start to call it, like I find that it makes people very uncomfortable if I don't fit in a box. Like
right.
People like you've experienced this whenever you're talking to anybody, they're like, yeah, shut up. What are you? What are you?
Right.
They really want to know what label. That way they can know whether they dismiss you or embrace you.
Right.
And if you're like, well, I don't know, really, they don't like that. It makes them uncomfortable. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance with comedy. I think everybody that goes into comedy knows that everybody relates to death and sex. We're all on some level, we're a little bit afraid of death, and all of us at some point have been aroused. So we've got those things. They're fairly.
I'm more afraid of sex.
You're more afraid of sex, yeah.
Looking forward.
Yeah.
To death,
Then you are a core demographic for my nerdy group of comedian friends. But those things didn't surprise me. The thing that surprised me doing stand-up was how worked up people get if you question team membership.
Yeah.
I like Jerry Seinfeld's got a great thing about, why are we, like you're rooting for this, the Jets, but like, are the people from, I don't know where the Jets are from. Are they from Cleveland? I don't know.
Where are the Jets from? See,
we're
surrounded
Dallas
by
Cowboys.
people.
I'm on firm footing here. Dallas Cowboys. You're like,
It's the New York Jets.
The New York Jets, yeah.
Yeah.
Jets. Are the people from New York? No, they're not. Are the owners from New York? Well, they live in New Jersey. So we're rooting for the jerseys. I have found that when I do stand up, I have, I'll do jokes about agnosticism and things. I've never really had anybody be like, because I've never had anybody come up and be like, how dare you, like, about religion or death or sex. But when I start getting people to question, like, well, why are you a part of this team? Why is this? People lose their minds. They are not okay with that. If you start poking them, and you're like, all I want to know is, why are you on this team? Why is this team important? What if, like, I don't see the team that way at all? People do not care for that.
Yeah.
And it's been a fascinating thing to just observe from a comedic standpoint.
I like to believe that there's a form of tribalism that is very healthy. So I'm like a deadhead, and going to a Grateful Dead concert it's a family gathering. It's a gathering of the tribe, and everybody speaks the same language and they know all the words to the songs. The same with the New York Jets. I'm not.
Or like Star Trek or something like that, where it's not exclusive.
Star Trek.
It's not zero-sum game.
And there's some value in that, because people, you read everybody arguing about the last episode of Game of Thrones, and people are so passionate about it. I'm like, it's a TV show, guys. It's going to be okay because it's fiction. But people get all passionate about it, and I think that's a healthy way to sort of channel your tribalism, because you're not actually invading Canada or something like that.
Yeah.
By the way, we need a wall in the north.
Right. Keep out the wildlings, of course.
I mean, Donald Trump keeps putting out all of these memes about Game of Thrones, and he clearly doesn't understand that the north is where the walkers come from.
Yeah, that's a good point. They're not coming from Dorne.
No.
Dorne's not the issue.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. I mean, I think there is like having a community, I think, is a very important thing. We have that deep craving to be a part of a community. We want to belong someplace. There's a great sense of comfort and joy in being part of a crowd. Without being hyperbolic, I think there's a sports gene, and I don't have it. I've got some mutant variant where I don't get it. When I go to a football game, I see 20,000 individuals. The last time I went to a football game with my dad in college, I started clapping. Everybody got mad at me. And they're like, why are you clapping? I'm like, well, the guy ran really fast. And they're like, well, he's on the other team. I was like, but he ran really fast. I was very impressed. I don't have that. I can only really get that if I can get it through singing. If I go to like a choir, or I go to, there's a bar in New York where we sing Broadway musicals that I really like. I can get that sense of group. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful feeling. I agree with you. I think when it's not a zero-sum game, or when it's not predicated on hate, because I think that's the flip side of tribalism is, I love my group because I hate your group. And I think that is such a intrinsic and woeful state of humanity that, the second, we all seem to kind of get along when we hated the communists. And then things are going pretty well, but the towers came down, and now we've got somebody else to hate. And then once that kind of receded, we're like, well, I need to hate somebody. I guess I hate you, Logan. I hate you. And I think it's terrible.
He's hateable.
He's hateable. Yeah,
he really is.
But yeah, there's definitely positive outlets for it.
Yeah, and by the way, I love going to football games because I feel like it's a legitimate excuse for day drinking outside.
I thought you'd just be marveling at like ticket prices or something. Like you're sitting there going, "Oh, what a great example of capitalism at work to bring people together."
Yeah, running the numbers and saying, "I don't get this."
Can I back up a little bit?
Yes.
A minute ago, you said that you find that the term libertarianism immediately sets off alarm bells and that kind of thing. Do you tend to use that term? Like I find I like the term classical liberal because I find that if I say classical liberalism, people rightly assume I'm talking about like Locke. And Bastiat, Edmund Burke, some clutch of people like that. Whereas if I say libertarian, they might reasonably infer that I mean anarchist, which I do not.
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel that that's a better term. And then there too, if I say like I am a classical liberal and I'm in favor of a carbon tax, you can kind of see how I got there. But if I say I'm a libertarian in favor of a carbon tax, it's like, oh, so you're just a bad libertarian. I don't know. Like, what kind of terms do you like to use?
A failed libertarian.
A failed libertarian is a lino.
So it's funny because in 2013 I wrote a book, Don't Hurt People and Don't Take Their Stuff. Mm-hmm. And I had a huge argument, not huge, but a substantial argument with the publisher because they wanted the word libertarian on the book cover. And I'm like, nobody uses that word. Nobody knows what it means. But they, of course, were interested in selling books, and they thought putting the L word on the cover and
clean up at the Cato bookstore.
Yeah, I mean, but of course, I'm more with Hayek. I'd rather use the word liberal, except nobody knows what I mean if I say that I'm a liberal in sort of the European classic sense. And classical liberal reminds me of classic Coke, and that was a complete failure. So we're a little bit nameless as well. So I do use the word libertarian, and if I get that arched eyebrow, I say small L, small L.
Yeah.
I'm agnostic about parties. I hope the Libertarian Party performs better in the future, but this isn't about parties at all. This is about a set of values that I have that really don't want to tell you how to live your life as long as you don't mess with me.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe the term liberal is modifying, because I am finding in my own usage and in terms of media that I consume that progressive now tends to denote the main label and animus of the left, whereas liberal I find is kind of declining in vogue. Liberal almost is becoming a neoliberal term, which I don't fully understand what neoliberalism, but it seems we're cousins with it. Like maybe I'm a neoliberal, I don't know.
It's a pejorative way of saying libertarian, particularly in Europe. If you're a neoliberal, you're one of those wild-eyed free market guys.
Oh, so I might I'm at least buddies with them.
You might be a neoliberal.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I could see that happening.
I'd like a word without sort of a qualifier or a made-up word. Like Hayek said that the word libertarian is kind of a made-up word, and he didn't like it for that reason. But I think it's probably better to avoid the labels altogether and just talk about the values.
I agree.
And make people wonder, like, well, that makes so much sense. Wonder what that guy is like. How does he identify?
I was thinking about this, like, I think yesterday, because I'm up in D.C. and so I'm talking to various friends and things, and I thought about it, and I was like, I think I could make a pretty good argument that I am functionally a liberal Democrat who thinks that politicians are sociopathic and incompetent. So, like, if you're a liberal, but you also think that everybody running the government is an incompetent sociopath, like, how would that worldview manifest? I think you'd get to where I'm at, of like, yay, gay people, like transgender, come on over, drink whiskey with me. Don't put the government in charge of that thing. That's a terrible idea, because they're going to run it into the ground.
I think that's sort of where I think that sweet spot is, because everybody, all my progressive friends worry about market failure, and they worry about corporations having too much power, and they believe that wealth sort of coagulates at the top, and I don't necessarily believe that, but I know that those rich people then go to the government, like Jeff Bezos might, and get a special deal. If you're Mark Zuckerberg, you want regulation, not because you care about hateful speech, but because you would love to kill the next guy who's trying to build a better platform. So that collusion between big government and big business, the inevitable abuse of power that allows Daenerys to torch the entire city of Westeros with a dragon. Like, no one should have a dragon. That's my philosophy. No one should have a dragon.
I'm sure you know Matt Welch. You're probably friends with him. Matt had a great metaphor that I've stolen that he did at a Reason Dinner a couple of years ago, where he talked about how power is almost like Frodo's ring, and Republicans want to use it to like force society to be more moral, and Democrats want to use it to force markets to behave and stop the rich people, and libertarians are like, throw it into the damn volcano. And that's very much where I don't want accumulation of power. Power worries me. I'm very anti-authoritarian. It's always very odd to me when I talk to people that have this idea of like, no, power's good. It's just we can only elect people we agree with forever. I'm like, wait a minute. So your system is contingent upon you never losing an election? That's your system? Is that you're going to be in a democracy and you have to win every election forever? That's ridiculous. Like, I don't want that at all.
So by now, everyone understands the title of your podcast, Something's Off with Andrew Heaton. Give us a shameless plug. If people, after, of course, they download and subscribe to Kibbe on Liberty, should they subscribe to Something's Off?
Yes, I think they should. I'll tell you why.
Really? Okay.
I think I'll tell you why. While I think that you and I are probably politically simpaticos, so if somebody's already listening, they're gonna be in that political headspace. But I think the deeper thing that I'm providing is it's going to be funny. I promise that you'll enjoy it. The top of the show is always going to be funny. But beyond that, I am consciously endeavoring to avoid this red team, blue team, histrionic rage thing going on right now, and I feel like there are a lot of people that are in the same camp that are probably political orphans like you and me, Matt, that don't really fit someplace. And on top of that, maybe they've got a neighbor that they disagree with, that they still like them, and they're kind of mystified as to why they're supposed to like fear and hate them. Yeah. Like, come on over, hang out with me. We're going to bring on some neighbors that we disagree with. We'll have a good time. We'll learn some things, maybe change our minds, but we're not going to be an echo chamber. We're not going to be peddling fear and hate.
And this is how comedy saves the world.
And this is how comedy saves the world. We're going to do it, gang.
Sweet. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Kibbe on Liberty. By now, you know this is the most important event of your week. So make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Click the little bell so you get notifications. Kibbe on Liberty, mostly honest conversations with mostly interesting people.